Amelia Toledo was born into a fairly uptight family. Her parents were immigrants from Mexico, and they always told her to be on her best behavior. Amelia did not know what this meant since she was only 4 at the time, but from watching her father's careful way he spoke around police officers and how her mother presented herself to others, did Amelia soon get the message: do not look out of place or abnormal, you're merely a guest here? Still, despite having 2 Mexican parents, there wasn't a lot Amelia knew about Mexico apart from her mother's cooking and her father's obsession with soccer. There was not much she knew about what being a Mexican was. She didn't have any siblings, and did not grow up in a neighborhood that readily accepted minorities. It was in these unfortunate circumstances that she developed a fascination with the country. She kept this goal in the back of her mind as she made her way through life. The opportunity wouldn't come until her 70th birthday, when she was retired, but she still offered accounting services to some clients willing to pay a price. Amelia had moved upstate and into a tiny home. Apparently, it was supposed to make a smaller footprint on the environment. She also owned 2 small pugs, Pepper and Candy. Amelia, ever since she moved out of her home state, has saved up every little penny and dollar she earned. This way, she could afford not only the plane ticket but also to pay her bills and the pet sitter while she was away. Amelia, after saving up, finally decided to purchase her first glass ticket. It wasn't to feel superior or privileged, but because she heard they had better Wi-Fi. She was definitely treating the trip to Mexico as a vacation. But until she got there, she needed a way to continue working on her brand new laptop. She was a rather hardworking woman ever since she was 9. Her mindset was set for high standards, and she strove to be her best self in all matters possible, using whatever tools she had at her disposal. Amelia studied what she did not understand, the English language or animals, but there was one subject that fascinated her more than anything: mathematics, numbers, division, multiplication, and fractions. It was also complicated, and she enjoyed it when her teachers noticed her grades improving at the next open house. Her parents were praised for raising such a smart child. This small boost of pride caused her parents to turn from authoritative to authoritarian. Instead of allowing their daughter to watch TV while eating dinner, they ordered her to eat as fast as possible so that she could quickly get back to studying. Although Amelia's strict home style brought stress going into middle school and high school, she was nonetheless appreciative of her parents. After all, they were doing this for her own well-being. Her proficiency with math allowed her to take serious advanced courses in geometry and calculus, despite her ability to think quickly. Amelia strayed from her math classes and lines grade. Instead, she became entranced with accounting. The concept of evaluating and categorizing numbers gives great insight into a person's life based solely on their business. Amelia got to see success and failure with every ledger T account or pivot table. It's telling a story about when her parents found out they were more or less supportive. Being an accountant is a fairly respectable job. Computers are the future, they'd say. However, they were also slightly disappointed by the news that Amelia could be an engineer as well, but instead she chose accounting. Amelia's flight took off around 4 p.m., so she arrived at the airport a little after 12 in the afternoon. Once she got her flight ticket, she went to sit down in the designated area. She received some credulous stares from those around her, as if they could not believe that this quaint old woman could afford such an expensive flight. Amelia knew they were glassing over at her, but she did not pay attention. She had learned how to deal with these kinds of individuals her whole life, especially in college. Amelia used to hear that to truly enjoy her time in college, she had to split her time between studying and partying, but if she had to be honest, she didn't see what good that would do in her first year of college. She used her extra scholarship money to get the best textbooks, journals, and tools to get ahead. This way, her parents wouldn't berate her. In the first few months, she had trouble adjusting to the new curriculum and schedule. It was totally different from her public high school. There were not necessarily straight-hour school days in college. She soon had to balance internships, clubs, programs, and classes. Amelia worked to the bone to make sure she didn't get left behind, which made it more stressful. Her college was a PWI, meaning that more than half of the student population was white. Back then, it was uncommon to see a brown woman attend college. Amelia would get stared at from around the campus, but now in this airport, it only got more aggravating when they were called to stand in line and board the plane. She felt the stares burning into her back once again. A middle-aged man tapped her shoulder from behind. Amelia turned and asked what was wrong. "This is first class," said the man as he pointed at the plane outside the large window. Amelia responded by showing him her ticket. I know, I bought the ticket myself. This was her very first flight on an airplane, but she was not stupid. She could read and speak both Spanish and English. However, it would be a lie if she said she did not feel nervous as she walked across a small tunnel and into the plane. It was a lot louder than she expected, not the people, but the engines. It unsettled her. Her man was never meant to fly. As Amelia crossed the aisle seats, she was stopped by her fairly young blonde woman. She somehow had 3 children accompanying her. Despite how expensive the tickets were without permission. The woman harshly grabbed Amelia's shoulder and said hello. Amelia was surprised, but kept her calm. She shrugged the hand from her shoulder. Yes, you shouldn't be here. The woman then proceeded to urge Amelia to go back down the aisle and ask the flight attendant to help you. Mrs. Amelia stepped away from the woman. My seat is right over there. No, this is first class. Me and my children are supposed to be here. You aren't. Amelia corrected her purely out of annoyance. It is my children and I, not me and my children. The woman furrowed her eyebrows and jerked her head back. Excuse me, that was unnecessary. You don't say that to me, Mexican. I've known English all my life. I'm sorry, but I'm not Mexican. Squinting her eyes, the woman gazed at her skeptically. Amelia continued, I was born and raised in America. You're lying. Look at you. You're all brown. Why else would you be on a flight to Mexico? 2 of the woman's children snickered behind her. The children looked to be about 10, 13, and 16. It hurt Amelia to see what the future leaders would turn out to be, but it wasn't their fault. Amelia could have ended up like that too. If she had this woman as her mother, it was all a matter of chance. Amelia chose again to ignore the woman's ignorant statements and said, I would like to sit down now if you will not stop making a scene next to the plane. By this point, this entitled woman had caught the attention of the flight attendant. She approached them and asked if there was a problem. Amelia firmly stated that the woman was blocking her from getting to her seat. The woman insisted that she wasn't the right. Eventually, the flight attendant went to get the captain from the flight deck. This kind of behavior wasn't uncommon. It usually occurred in supermarkets or at work, especially around individuals who had never been exposed to other cultures. However, there were a few notable gems, like her ex-husband Matt, who earned her bachelor's in accounting with a minor in business management. Amelia was quickly able to find a high-paying job for the next decade. She would jump between a few jobs until she settled on a large banking company, where she would meet her future husband, Matt Evans, who was one of several lawyers hired to help expand the company nationwide. Amelia and Matt resided in different parts of the building, but they would occasionally see each other, be it in the parking lot lobby or the various staff rooms. Matt was the first to initiate a conversation as they waited outside the owner's office. Amelia's parents were, to say the least, satisfied with her choice of partner, a lawyer. You say how lucky, her mother would exclaim proudly. Until now, her family would tread water as they lived in the country, but now that Amelia was an accountant and she was due to marry a lawyer, they were looking forward to the good times ahead. That wasn't necessarily the case, however. Amelia and the woman stood there in awkward silence. 2 of the children chose to gaze outside through their windows, while the youngest looked at Amelia's clothes. The 10-year-old stared for a little while, and eventually he said, I like your bracelets. This compliment warmed Amelia's heart. Thank you. They're called Ojo bracelets. They're supposed to protect you from harm. The child smiled and asked if he could have one. Amelia glanced over at the woman, but she didn't seem bothered by it. She was probably going to sell it as soon as they got off the plane. Nevertheless, Amelia offered him one. She gave him a bright red bracelet and tied it as much as she could around his small wrist, just enough so it wouldn't slip off. It was a surprise to see the captain appear from the flight deck. Apart from Amelia, he was one of the only people with dark skin. Place her finger on why he had a square face resembling hers, but also eyes that didn't. The familiarity that came from the man instantly brought Amelia comfort, as the flight attendant had done before. The captain also asked if there was any problem. The woman re-explained the situation, all the while Amelia tried her best to defend herself despite the woman's hysterics, or maybe because of it, the captain seemed to take Amelia's side. He told the woman that if she didn't calm down, then he would have to kick her out of the plane along with her children. This simple threat shot the woman up. She shook her head disappointedly and sat down in her seat. The captain escorted Amelia to her seat and apologized for the woman's behavior. He said that those kinds of rude people aren't that common nowadays. Once she was seated, the conversation took a turn. The captain examined Amelia before asking, "Were you born in the city?" "Yes, sir, and raised any children." Amelia stayed quiet for a moment, then she shook her head. She didn't feel it necessary to mention a personal struggle so blatantly. In fact, she did have a child decades ago. Amelia's water had broken in the middle of the night. Matt had quickly taken her to the hospital. She was in labor for 3 hours. It hurt to hear the nurses say they had to wait for her to be more dilated. At that point, Amelia just wanted to curse everybody out. Nevertheless, she stayed as polite as she could muster, and finally, she gave birth to her son Chris. It was all well at first. Her parents were excited to see that they had a grandson. However, around the week after he was born, the doctors noticed something off about his health. They took Chris away from Amelia and into the NICU. Amelia would soon find out that her son had been experiencing some kind of organ failure for weeks. He would stay in the hospital even after Amelia had been discharged. She was persuaded by her husband and parents to stay home and recover some more so she could take it easy. Matt would say, "Focus on work and take your mind off it," her father would say, and so Amelia did. She strode headfirst into her work and put all her trust in her family, knowing that everything would turn out all right and that the sickness was just a fluke. However, Amelia, as she was getting ready to head home from work, would get the terrible news that her husband, their son Chris, had passed away. This single call would alter the trajectory of her life. Amelia suddenly quit her job and spent hours upon hours in bed, debilitated with a depressed episode. Matt tried to tear her up, but it was futile, and once would pass, then another, then another. It was nearing the end of the year when Amelia would begin to recover. She found a new passion for coin collecting. She'd go through hundreds of coins and group them by year as if she were a druggie experiencing withdrawal for a little while. She also got heavily into origami. Amelia was not the best at it, and the paper cuts were not something to look forward to, but they did bring her some sort of solitude. Matt Evans and her tried again and again, but it seemed that Chris was a true miracle since Amelia was never able to conceive again. The kids' attempts to rebuild her life would lead her to divorce. Not only that, but it managed to reconcile with her long-lost goal of visiting Mexico, and that's why she's here now. Really, it's just that you look similar to this photo. The captain reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. What Amelia saw shocked her to her core. It was an old wedding photo, the only photo she had of herself as an adult in it. She held a bouquet of bright, colorful flowers, with Matt holding her waist. They looked so happy. The captain continued to surprise her by saying, "Those are my parents, my biological parent status. The photo was given to me by the adoption center." Amelia stared up at him. Her mind took a few seconds to process what he just said, and she struggled to think of what to say. If what he's saying is true, then say, "What is your name?" "Oh, but up until I was around 5, it was Chris." Amelia who muttered. "Chris Evans," the captain smiled. These days, Amelia Toledo rarely feels genuine happiness. She and Matt never speak anymore. Actually, Amelia didn't even know if he was alive, and her parents have both definitely since passed. Amelia organized a funeral all by herself. It was quite a hefty pay, but her parents firmly stated that they wanted the best of the best caskets, so she obliged. However, this very moment on the plane makes up for all the years he had spent in sadness. She at first only shook her son's hand, but after a minute, she proceeded to hug him. They stayed like that for a few minutes, so how could he be alive? Amelia vividly remembers the moment her husband said that he had passed. It replaced it in her mind constantly. The mere facts are rather tragic. Chris did indeed have some form of organ failure, which was caused by undiagnosed coagulopathy, a condition where the blood's ability to clot is impaired, leading to excessive bleeding, but going against the information Amelia received, Chris did not die, he recovered. Amelia's deceased parents told a different story. They did not want to be associated with a sick child, especially if it would cost him unnecessary expenses for treatment. Thus, they roped in Matt, her ex-husband, along with the charade and told Amelia the devastating news of her son's passing. Chris, or brother Jack, was given up for adoption. He spent half a decade in an adoption center before finally getting brought in by a loving couple who already had 2 children. That's when his name was changed to Jack Peralta, And if Amelia had to be brutally honest, she thinks it was for the best that he didn't stay with her. Matt wasn't that caring of a husband, and her parents were not the best at showing emotions other than disappointment or anger. "You're doing okay now?" Amelia asked. "Oh yeah, I remember when I was 11. I got a giant scar after tripping while playing tag. I take vitamin pills now and regularly go to the doctor." Amelia wanted to spend more time with her son, but she knew he had work to attend to, so she kept her mouth from talking too much or it'd slip out. She understood the importance of hard work. The captain glanced back at the flight attendant, who was in the process of closing the plane's door. All the passengers were already in their seats, ready for the flight to take off. The only person standing was the captain. "You know," he continued, "when we land, we can spend some hours together." Amelia smiled a little wider than she should have. Bueno, which was Spanish for very good, had always felt awkward when expressing emotions via joy or grief. It always felt too much or too unnecessary. Jack responded solemnly, "Sorry, I don't know Spanish." "We'll fix that." Amelia and her son, now named Jack, walked down the streets of Mexico together. They take in the gorgeous scenery as well as the local food vendors selling flautas tacos, tortas enchiladas and even pepián from Guatemala. Amelia was already accustomed to these dishes, but seeing her son's reactions to the delicious food made her extremely happy. That's when she began thinking about the photo. How did he get it back in a hotel? Amelia asked him the question she had on her mind about the photo. Jack responded, "I heard from my godmother that the photo came from a man. He didn't identify himself, but he looked to be around his 30s. Maybe even older." Amelia folded her arms over her stomach in an attempt to consolidate herself. She had a feeling for who it was, that this man had blonde hair, oh yeah, and a striped tie. "Well, my godmother did mention something about his attire. I think it was his sneakers that bothered him so much, they didn't match his suits," he said. Jack proceeded to laugh, but all Amelia felt was dread. If this is true, then she'd have to make a pretty charged phone call to a certain retirement halt. Matt Evans, her ex-husband, used to joke about his chances of ending up at a facility for the elderly when he got older. If I did, he'd say he would have to be a fancy one, and Amelia knew exactly the one he would choose if he was still alive, which was once her son left for his own room. Amelia dialed the number for the Green Rock Assisted Living Facility. She knew the number since Amelia had constantly been told by her parents that they wanted to be moved there, but she did not have the money at the time, so every day she would memorize the number until she had financial stability, but that day would arrive too late. Her parents passed away before it could happen, so the memorization hasn't gone to waste, because now Amelia could use it to confront her ex-husband's lie. "Paul, please." The operator said this over the line. A minute later, Amelia heard Matt's voice. It had aged considerably, and he knew it. "Yep, this is Matt Evans." "What do you want, Amelia?" "I just want to catch up." The other side went quiet for a few seconds. He thought she had lost connection, but then Matt said, "No, you didn't. You haven't called in over 40 years. Why would you suddenly call now?" "Well, what if I told you I was dying? Then this goal is a waste of your time." Amelia shifted her feed and expressed her annoyance. "I guess it is quite good. I'm not dying at the moment. You know who I ran into today?" "No, and frankly, I hate kissing Chris." Our son, Matt, went quiet for a considerable amount of time. Amelia could only guess what was going through his mind. Sadness, shame, disappointment. What she did not expect to hear was an apathetic, "How is he doing?" Amelia bit her nails. She hadn't done it since she was 9. Actually, despite the abandonment, silence passed between them. Amelia waited to hear some sort of eruption of joy or tears of happiness, but none came. Instead, he stayed quiet. Eventually, Amelia aggressively said Maldito was an imbecile. "Did you know how hard it was for me? Why didn't you say anything?" Why didn't Matt hesitate to retort? It would have been even harder to keep that boy. He was sick. "Amelia, you really wanted to carry around a sick child who could die any second." Amelia tried to keep her voice from yelling, partly due to the fact that it hurt to do so. "My son's life should not have been devalued because of his sickness. I carried them for 9 months so I could meet and care for him. How could you take him away from me like that?" "It was not me, woman. Your parents were the ones who proposed the idea to me." Amelia wiped the tears from her face. You're lying. Stop passing the blame, and a different voice could be heard faintly talking to Matt from the other side. Moments later, Matt would return to the phone. I'm sorry, Amelia, but I don't have time for this. I wish it could have been different. I really do. He hesitated before asking, can I talk to him? Amelia was about to snap her phone shut, but then she thought about it. If she kept her ex-husband away from contacting their son, then how can she act like she has more of a high ground with an exasperated sighs? She said, I'll give him the number for the facility, but keep in mind that I won't sugarcoat what you have done, and she said that's unfair. Amelia, no, it really isn't. She hung up. Whatever her son decides to do with this information will be all up to him. It is his life and no one else's. Amelia was busy wiping her tears when she heard the knock at her door. It was Chris Jack. He had heard the combative tone of her voice through the wall and had come in to check if she was okay. It was clear she wasn't. Amelia has shaken up due to being exposed to the truth and having trouble understanding, but nevertheless, they existed. It stood right in the center of her hotel room. Are you all right? Jack asked. He had this concerned expression on his face. Amelia didn't say anything, although he felt it was unnecessary. Jack knew it was warranted. He wrapped an arm around Amelia and said, sorry, I couldn't be there for you. If I'd been able to walk and talk, I would have run back to you. Amelia smiled. Of course, thank you so much.